Óðinn, the All-Father of Norse mythology and king of its pantheon. Óðinn is a complex figure who bears many names. So many, in fact, that if I were to list them all in this video, we would be here all fucking day. One of his earliest was the name the Germanics gave him, Woden, which is actually where we get the word for Wednesday, from Woden's Day. To speak of Óðinn is to speak of the beginning, and whilst he wasn't the first god, he is responsible for the creation of 7 of the 9 realms. So I'll go back to the beginning. The oldest beings within Norse mythology are Ymir, a giant who birthed the race of the Jötnar from his armpits, and a great big cow named Uthumla. Ymir lived off the milk of the cow, while the cow licked at salty ice, eventually forming into the shape of a man. This shaped ice then came alive and became the first Aesir god, Buri. And whilst Buri is the primordial god of Norse mythology, don't get attached, he's not important, he will not be around long. Also not really important for anything other than furthering the Aesir royal line is his son, Bor, who married a Jotun woman named Bestla, and together they had 3 sons, Vili, Ve, and Óðinn. These 3 boys grew up to eventually kill Ymir, and the tremendous flood created by spilling the giant's blood washed over the land and drowned their parents, their grandparent, the big cow, and almost all the Jötnar. And from the giant Ymir's blood, and his bones, and his skin, and his sinew, 3 brothers went on to craft the rest of the 9 realms, eventually building Asgardr to be their kingdom, where Óðinn placed down his throne and took his role as king of the Aesir gods. As king, Óðinn soon found himself a queen, the goddess Frigg. There are some theories and later stories that have Óðinn married to other goddesses, such as Freyja or Skadi, though these theories often hinge on the idea that these goddesses are actually Frigg under a different name or title. So, no matter what, Frigg is his wife one way or another. Once married, Frigg bore Óðinn 4 sons. First was their favourite son, the beautiful god Baldur, and his twin, the blind god Hödr. Their third son was Hermodr, the swift messenger god, who really has not got much going for him. And their 4th son was Bragi, who inherited his father's love of poetry. But Óðinn, like many men with power, was not sated by the love of just one gal. One of his lovers happened to be the personification of the earth, Jörð, with whom he sired his strongest and most famous son, Thor, who became the defender of Asgardr. Heimdallr, the watchman of Asgard, was conceived when, during his travels, Óðinn became infatuated with 9 Jotun sea maidens he found asleep on a random beach somewhere. Another son, Vidar, the silent god of vengeance, was born from yet another Jotun woman, this one named Gridr. He seems to really have a fondness for Jotun women, in spite of the fact they're supposed to be his enemies. And finally, his youngest son is Vali, who was born from a woman named Rindr. Her description is a little nebulous. Sometimes she's another Jotun, other times she's a goddess. She might have even been a human princess. It's really up to interpretation. Now, it is possible that he had other children. There's a bunch of different theories that suggest that some of the other gods were also his kin, but these connections are usually loose, at best. For example, some people believe that Tyr is a son of Óðinn, but sources are divided, and personally, seeing as historically speaking, Tyr is actually older than Óðinn, I don't feel that he is. And there's also a bunch of other alleged sons that are mentioned like a single time in the Eddas and then never again, so I don't feel them worth speaking on. That's the thing with Norse mythology. In so many of the stories and the poems, names will just be dropped and then never come up again or ever be important. Now, you may be a god, but Óðinn is still very much a king, and bastards are aplenty when you radiate with that much power. I mean, with a certain interpretation, he's technically everyone's father, being the All-Father. Through his sons, Óðinn does have several grandchildren. From Baldur and his wife, Nanna, there's Forseti, who takes the role as an adjudicator for the Aesir, helping them solve disputes without resorting to their favourite form of argument, intense bloody violence. From Thor and his wife, Sif, he has a granddaughter named Thrúðr, who quite possibly may serve as one of his Valkyria, serving mead in the Great Hall of the Slain. Thor also has 2 sons, Mothi, who he had with his wife, and Magni, who he had with his Jotun lover, Jarl Saxa. Like with his supposed sons, there's a bunch of other vague suggestions and singular mentions of other possible grandchildren, but the ones I've spoken about are the only ones worth noting that I could find. There is one other person of great importance that I consider Odin's family, a brother, one of sworn oath as opposed to shared lineage, one he is much closer to than his actual biological siblings. And surprise, surprise, it's another bloody Jotun, his blood brother, Loki. The two having mixed their bloods and taken a vow to always remain side by side. Where Odin drinks, Loki drinks also. And this is something that never ever causes a single problem for Odin or any of the other Aesir at all. No problems, not a single one. I'm being sarcastic, can you tell? Odin is known to keep the company of an array of animals, like his two pet ravens, Hugin and Munin, or Thought and Memory, who, while Odin sits on his throne, fly all across the 9 realms, observing everything that transpires before returning at the end of the day to relay their findings. Alongside him, Odin also keeps 2 wolves, Geri and Freki, their names meaning greedy and ravenous, in reference to the fact that they eat all the food that comes to his table. Whilst his ravens represent Odin's wisdom and foresight, Geri and Freki are more in tune with his power and ferocity. And finally, he rides an invincible 8-legged magical horse named Sleipnir, who, with his pale grey coat, is considered the fastest and most agile steed in all the 9 realms. He obtained this mount from his blood brother, Loki, who, in the form of a mare, gave birth to Sleipnir after allowing himself to be fucked by a stallion. No, I'm not going to provide any more context for that. It does not make the sentence any less insane. In his spare time, Odin is known to travel the 9 realms under his moniker, Wanderer, in an endless search for more knowledge and wisdom. And whilst detailed description of any Norse god is sparse, we can deduce that Odin most commonly holds the appearance of an old man with a long grey beard, often wearing clothes that are blue, black or grey, and often donning a spotted cloak or broad-brimmed hat that shrouds his features. This appearance denotes his persona as the wise and mysterious traveller, and is often what he appears as in stories where he assists or guides a hero on their quest. Though Odin is also known to disguise himself when the situation calls for it, either as a mortal or sometimes as an animal, usually as a way of sneaking or tricking his way into furthering his goal. The most distinct aspect of any description of the wise god is the fact he is missing one of his eyes, having sacrificed it for a drink of water from the well of Erd, or the well of wisdom. Odin, among many other things, is associated with war, being the one to often lead the Aesir into battle, and being the one to end the war between the Aesir and the Vanir. He's commonly known to stir the brings of conflict within Midgard, often playing a part in the wars of men, picking sides and pushing the tides of battle to favour whoever he's rooting for. He also shows favour to certain warriors, his favourites being the Berserkir and the Ulfhednar, ferocious warriors famous for entering a trance while in battle that made them practically invincible, possibly thanks to Odin, who also demonstrates such ferocity in war. Though him wanting to see men die on the battlefield is more than just mere bloodlust, because Odin, alongside the goddess Freyja, command the Valkyrian, the choosers of the slain, a band of psychopomp warrior women who pluck the souls of fallen warriors up from the battlefield and bring half of them to Odin's great hall of the slain, Valhall, the other half possibly going with Freyja. In Valhall, these warriors, known as Einherjar, spend their afterlife drinking all day and fighting all night, waiting for the day they are called to the final battle at the end of the world. Also in line with this taste for battle is his stint as leader of the Wild Hunt, a European legend of a mythical procession of ghostly hunters and all manners of monsters and beasts that would swarm over Europe, often accompanied by wolves or dogs and riding horses with many legs, burning down any houses that get in their way while they hunt either for a specific prey or kill or kidnap whoever it is that isn't lucky enough to be found, often forcing those they collect to join their hunt. And it's common for the appearance of this wild hunt to forebode an outbreak of war and death. For weapons, Odin wields the legendary spear Gungnir, created by the master dwarven blacksmiths, the sons of Ivaldi, and commissioned by Loki as part of reparations for cutting off Thor's wife's hair. This weapon is imbued with runic magic that means it never misses its mark, a talent that came in very handy when it came to ending the war between the Vanir and the Aesir. Another notable artifact possessed by the Wise One is the arm ring Draupnir, also created by dwarves on the behest of his blood brother Loki. Every 9 nights, the pricey bit of jewellery duplicates itself. 8 additional rings of the same material, weight, and size literally drip from the original, granting Odin essentially infinite wealth fit for a king. When it comes to powers, Odin wields the magic of the runes. And with these powerful spells, it's said that Odin can heal any bodily injury and cure any disease. He can bind his enemies and render their weapons useless. He can entrance any woman he desires and win her heart. He can control the elements and change the weather. He can protect his allies, and he can raise the dead. Really, he can do just about anything his imagination can conjure, and considering his vast wisdom, that is a deep well to draw from. This is what leads him to being one of the gods of magic, or Seidr, which is quite peculiar because Seidr, or magic, in Old Norse culture was considered a very womanly practice. Men who engaged in it were mocked in a similar way that men today might be mocked for knitting or cheerleading. Though maybe he's given a little bit of slack from the other gods, 1, because he's their king, and 2, because of how he went about attaining these powers. To learn the secret of the runes, Odin had to conduct a ritual that involved sacrificing himself, stabbing himself in the side with a spear, and hanging himself from the world tree for 9 days and 9 nights. Hanging from a bit of wood and stabbed in the side with a spear. Why does that sound so familiar? So, that's Odin. God of wisdom, divination, magic, war, death, poetry, and much, much more. I find Odin to be quite a fascinating figure. He's interesting because, well, he obviously embodies this air of knowledge and wisdom and power. First coming across this sagely figure, wandering the world and amassing knowledge. But that's only really one side of him. But he's also quite selfish and violent and power-hungry in a way that's so common for vicious rulers. His own avarice is what brings about the destruction of everything. During his travels, his thirst for knowledge eventually leads him to gaining enough wisdom to see fate itself, something that really only the Norns should be able to do. And because of this, he witnesses Ragnarok, the end times. And when he prepares for it, those preparations are what cement its certainty. He flies too close to the sun. There's plenty of stories about kings bringing about their own doom through greed and arrogance, but it being the central figure of the entire pantheon is so interesting to me. I mean, there's literally theories that he was the true mastermind behind the death of Bolver, his own son, and that he just set Loki up to be the fall guy. But that's a story for another day. So for now, understand this. Knowledge is power, but it is also a burden. The more you know, the more you want to know, until the weight of the world becomes too heavy to bear. Each day I fear thought may not return, but I fear for memory more.